Hi everyone, welcome to this video where we will be discussing idioms. So in the previous video we introduced non-compositional meaning in semantics, and we discussed two types of linguistic phenomena where non-compositional meaning exists basically, which are anomalies and metaphors. And today we'll be discussing idioms also as an example of non-compositional meaning in semantics, and we'll be discussing this in details. So let's start with a quick reminder of what non-compositional meaning is. So we discussed earlier that the meaning of an expression is not always obvious even to native speakers of a language. So meanings may be obscured in many ways, or at least may require some imagination or special knowledge on our parts as speakers of a language in order to understand an expression. So we saw that semantic rules compute sentence meaning compositionally based on the meanings of words and the syntactic structure that contains them. There are, however, interesting cases in which compositionality breaks down. That is to say, we as speakers of a language are unable to understand the meaning of a sentence from its individual words or the syntactic rules that bring the words together. So we are unable, or compositionality breaks down either because there is a problem with words or with the semantic rules. If one or more words in a sentence do not have a meaning, like the example of anomalies, for example, which we discussed earlier, then obviously we will not be able to compute a meaning for the entire sentence. So here is the different types of non-compositional meaning. So even if the individual words have meaning in a sentence but cannot be combined together as required by the syntactic structure and related semantic rules, we will also not get to a meaning, and we refer to these situations as semantic anomaly. Alternatively, it might require a lot of creativity and imagination on our part to derive a meaning, and that is what happens in metaphors. Finally, some expressions called idioms, which are the subject of our discussion today, have a fixed meaning, that is, a meaning that is not compositional. So applying compositional rules to idioms gives rise to funny or sometimes inappropriate meanings. So here's the outline of our class today. We'll be discussing the definition of idioms and idioms in relation to semantic properties, idioms and humor, the structure of idioms and our mental lexicon, and idioms in translation, and the difference between idioms and metaphors. So I'll start with some questions for you to think about as we're discussing today's topic. So what are idioms? Is it possible to guess the meaning of idioms from the meaning of its individual words? Do idioms follow or violate semantic features? And for both cases, provide examples. Are idioms part of our mental lexicon? Are there idioms in Arabic? If yes, can you think of any examples? And what is the difference between idioms and metaphors? Of course, you're strongly advised to check the class readings before you carry on with this presentation, because this will help you better understand our discussion in this video. So we'll start with discussing a couple of questions to help us better understand what idioms are. So the first question is, what's an idiom? And the second question is it possible to guess the meaning of idioms from the meaning of its individual words? So idioms or idiomatic expressions are phrases whose meanings are not predictable on the basis of the meanings of the individual words. So actually the definition of idioms, this definition answers both questions. So idioms are decomposable. That's to say, we cannot decompose the words to understand the meaning, because the meaning is fixed and they have to be learned the way they are. An example is a famous idiom which is with flying colors. So if you already know this idiom, so you know what it means, but if you don't know what it means, can you think of the meaning of this idiom? Here's an example. She passed her exam with flying colors. So basically, with flying colors means that she did very well in the exam. So, but if you don't know the meaning, can you guess the meaning from the individual words like flying and colors? Probably not. So let's consider the following sentences. The door kicked the man. The ship died. So, do you think that these sentences are semantically correct? Probably not, because a door cannot kick a man. We know that one of the semantic features of the door that it's minus animate or plus inanimate, so a door cannot kick anyone, actually. The same thing with the ship died. So another question is, are these sentences syntactically correct? Yes, they are. The ship died and the door kicked the man. They are grammatically or syntactically correct, but they are semantically odd because they violate the rules of semantic features. So this brings us to our next question. So let's discuss idioms and semantic features. So a question is, do idioms follow or violate semantic features? And in both cases, think of some examples in English or in Arabic. So, like metaphors, idioms can break the rules on combining semantic properties, and that's why we're discussing idioms, metaphors, and anomalies under non-compositional semantics, which we discussed and we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. So let's consider, for example, this idiom, to eat one's heart out. So, of course, this idiom has a meaning, which is to feel great sadness or to be very jealous. But if we think of this idiom in terms of semantic features and semantic properties, we know that the object of the verb eat must usually be something with the semantic feature edible, and of course, no one can eat a heart. So, for example, that's why a sentence like he ate his hat would sound a bit awkward, and because of course it violates semantic properties. However, in the example we have here, to eat one's heart out, this restriction is violated, but the idiom is still meaningful and used in spoken language. So let's move on to discuss the syntactic structure of idioms. So I have a question for you. Which of the following sentences is not an idiom? She put her foot in her mouth. The mouth in which she put her foot was hers. Her foot was put in her mouth. Now you guessed it right. The second and third sentences are not idioms, while the first sentence is an idiom. So basically, she put her foot in her mouth. This is an idiom. To put one's foot in one's mouth means to say something by accident that embarrasses or upsets someone. So here, idioms are similar in structure to ordinary phrases, except that they tend to be frozen, and this means that this does not apply to all idioms, but most of idioms tend to be frozen in form or in their structure and do not readily undergo rules that change word order or substitution of their parts, and this is why the first sentence is an idiom, while doing some changes in the structure of the sentence will result in the second and third sentence not being idiomatic, basically. Now, to further explain this point, let's consider the following examples. The FBI kept tabs on radicals. Tabs were kept on radicals by the FBI. Radicals were kept tabs on by the FBI. So my question to you here is, which of the following sentences are actually idiomatic? You guessed it right. All the sentences are idiomatic. So basically the idiom here is to keep tabs on something, which means to watch something or someone carefully. So although we discussed in the previous slide that some idioms or idiomatic expressions tend to be frozen and we're not free to change their structure, this does not apply to all idioms, because as we can see here in this example, the three sentences are idiomatic. So just to continue our discussion of the syntactic structure of idioms, there are, however, some idioms whose parts can be moved without affecting the idiomatic sense. So how do we get to know that? By exposure, more and more exposure to idiomatic expressions in the language that we're studying will help us better understand which idioms are frozen or fixed in their structure and which idioms are more flexible. So idioms often lead to humor. So I have a question for you. Why did the boy throw the clock out of the window? To see if time really flies. So why are the baby strawberries crying? Because their parents are in a jam. There are also other idioms for in a jam, by the way. Why were the raindrops so heavy? I guess this one is very easy. Because it was raining cats and dogs. Why did the boy eat his homework? You guessed it right. Because the teacher said it was a piece of cake. So are idioms part of our mental lexicon, our mental dictionary? Idioms must be entered into the lexicon or mental dictionary as single items with their meanings specified. So we have to be exposed to idioms first and learn their meaning as fixed expressions. And so basically speakers must learn the special restrictions on their use in sentences, like we discussed before, that some idioms, the structure of some idioms tends to be frozen, while other idioms are more flexible when it comes to structure. So we have to be exposed to idioms first, and then they become part of our mental lexicon. So I have a couple of questions for you here. Are there idioms in Arabic, and how are idioms translated? So are there idioms in Arabic? Yes, there are actually idioms in every language. So all languages have idioms, but idioms rarely, if ever, translate word for word from one language to another. So this also answers the question, how are they translated then? Let's see. So here is an example we have, which is to kick the bucket. Of course, this idiom in English means to pass away. However, to kick the bucket in Spanish, for example, does not have any idiomatic meaning, but just the literal meaning. And you can think also of the same idiom in Arabic. If we translate to kick the bucket into Arabic, it will not have any, it will not have the idiomatic meaning it has in English. So in Spanish, there is another idiom actually that means to pass away. But if we try to translate this idiom, the Spanish idiom, into English, it will literally translate to stretch the animal leg, which of course has no idiomatic sense in English, but in Spanish it means to pass away. Another example is this is a heartwarming news. So if we are to translate this into Arabic, would actually say لقد أثلج هذا الخبر صدري. So actually here there is a difference between heartwarming and أثلج because of the climate actually in the different countries in which Arabic and English are spoken. So what is the difference between idioms and metaphors? So most idioms originate as metaphorical expressions that establish themselves in the language and become frozen in their form and meaning. So this basically brings me to the end of this presentation. So today we discussed idioms. We discussed idioms in terms of their structure and in terms of their meaning. And when it comes to their structure, we discussed that the structure is generally fixed. However, In some examples, the structure may be more flexible and may change and still give the idiomatic meaning, like the example we gave to keep tabs on someone or something. We also discussed the meaning of idioms, and we mentioned that the meaning of idioms is decomposable. That's to say, it's fixed and it has to be learned as it is. So this is actually what we discussed today, idioms. This was part of our discussion of non-compositional meaning and semantics. In a previous video, we discussed anomalies, metaphors, and idioms, all of which are expressions that cannot be understood from the individual meaning of the words. Sometimes in anomalies the words are nonsensical and they don't make any sense on their own. In metaphors there is a bit of imagination needed on the part of the speaker in order to be able to understand the meaning of the metaphor. When it comes to idioms, as we discussed today, the meaning is fixed. We have, as speakers of the language, we have to be exposed to idioms, and then they become part of our mental lexicon. This brings me to the end of this presentation. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in another video. Have a nice day. Bye.